Okay, so we're getting started. Time to turn on your videos if they are not already on. And for those of you who already have them on, thank you so much. It is nice to see your faces, and I appreciate doing class with you and getting to see you even after the weekend. So, couple of things. We've been meeting now for a couple of weeks, and so you should be starting to get used to things. I'm anxious to see your anthropometry labs and see what you did with those. And just so that you know, I know that we're in the first couple of weeks. Looking for you to do a good job up to a certain level, and then I'll expect you to get better as we go. So I'm not going to be grading too terribly tough right now, but we're going to ask more of you as we get going. I'm also really anxious to see your videos from the scavenger hunt, mostly so that I can get to know you a little bit better, since it's a lot of times you guys are doing stuff, but I don't get to interact with you quite as much as I would like to. So I'm going to get going with sharing a screen with you so that we can start today. All right, let's start here for today. Because I am going to ask you to put on your thinking caps. And I'm not expecting you to do research right now. I'll tell you when we're doing that. But I do want you to think. And I'm going to ask you to be doing some group work. But before we do that, I'm going to kind of get your feet wet. I'm going to like kind of show you what I'm looking for you to do. Now, way back, if we were to roll the clock back to several hundreds of years ago, there were some people that were curious about the organisms that were around them. And they were like going, I wonder if we could put them in a group. And let me tell you why this is like super important. Because even if you wanted to know all of the animals in the world, not even the plants, but all of the animals in the world, even if you wanted to know every single kind of bird that there is in the world, you would have to be learning more than 10,000 of them, different species. And even some of the brightest, smartest people in the world don't know all 10,000 species, or if they do, they don't know them very well. So sometimes it's really helpful to put people in, or animals or plants into categories. And by knowing those categories with some very similar qualities, that can help you know more than if you try to learn them all. So way back in the day of Aristotle, if you've ever heard of him, in a Greek, probably something with a Greek theater sort of style, he went out there and said, "Oh, I think that there are three classifications of animals: those that fly, those that stand on the land, and those that swim in the water." Now, I'd like you to think really quickly, and in fact, you can enter it into the chat. Can you think of an animal that's going to cause a problem with these categories? Okay, so I've got some amphibians, some frogs, turtles. Okay. So just not to pick on you, but yeah, good submission there. And I'm hoping more of you will start to submit things today. But Ryan, why did you pick frog? Why is frog a problem?
Because they start off as tadpoles that like live in the water only, and then once they become fully grown frogs, they live both water and land.
Great. And Ezra, you had a really good submission too. How about waterfowl? What is the problem with them?
Um, Well, twists, for example, can swim, they can walk on land pretty efficiently, and they can fly.
Great. So those are all really good qualities. And here's what I'd like you to know about this. Aristotle might have started us off, and I'm only giving you his name because we know that he did this. Not that other people didn't, but we know he did this and he started us off. And if we are scientists, we're going to say, oh, okay, that's great, but let's try to find some areas where this doesn't work. And you guys just did that. And as scientists, we'd say, okay, well, that was a great start, but we can do better. And that's kind of where we're headed. So with that said, I have some pictures. Now, if we were going to put all of these organisms into one category, what do you think we might put them into? Go ahead and throw it into chat. Great. So I'm already seeing some people going, oh, plants, plants, plants. They are all plants. And you're right. So that's going to be a very general category. And it's going to fit many of these organisms, the examples that I've given you here. So we put them into plants. So let's see what I did on this next slide. I said, yeah, you're right. These are all plants. That's our most general category. But then I divided it into some subcategories. I said, oh, I've got some trees and I've got some bushes. Maybe you might say that they're shrubs. That's okay too. Or you might say something else. We could divide them differently, which means that scientists don't always agree on the divisions. But what we're going to do is hopefully find some evidence to either support these categories or to maybe say, no, we gotta have a better idea. So here's the next slide. And you'll see what I did is I took the plants and I still divided them by two subcategories, but now I'm gonna get more specific. And these might not be words that you're familiar with, and that's okay for today because I'm only using this as an example. So I divided the trees even further into subcategories, but you can see that no matter what, the evergreens are still trees and the trees are still plants. So even if I put them into very specific subcategories, they are still going to fit into the more general categories above them. And that's an important concept. That means that you want to have this in your notes. If you're not taking notes, please get going, right? So we are classifying organisms and we're putting them into categories and we're going to make them a little bit more specific and then a little bit more specific than that. But no matter what, when I have a deciduous tree, which means that the leaves fall off every winter, that they still fall in the category of trees, just like evergreens do, even though deciduous trees are now separate. They're in a different specific category than evergreens. Because I'm going to have you guys try this out in just a minute. Here's what I'd like you to think about, though. Here I made even bigger chart. All right, so I've got plants, and I threw the bushes off to the side just because it was getting too small. But the plants have been divided into trees and bushes. The trees have been divided into evergreens. And then I even got more specific, and I didn't label these for you, but one of them is a spruce tree and the other is a pine tree. They're much more specific, even though they're both evergreens, even though they're both trees, even though they're both plants. So that's what you're going to be doing in our first practice session today. And I'm going to put you, I'm going to open a Jamboard for you, or you're going to join the Jamboard, and I will give you the link in just a minute. But what I want you to do is I want you to think about categorizing everything that we're going to be looking at. And I want you to put some labels on them just like I did here, where I said, oh, there's trees and there are evergreens, but I'm going to give you something a little bit more simple, something I think you'll know better. So I want you to add the labels and then eventually get them down to where you have some specific organisms. In this case, we're going to use candy, right? So just to remind you, here's the candy that you guys are going to be dealing with. And I'm sorry I can't donate candy for you to eat today. Apologize. But I'll owe it to you if we can get back into the classroom. But your job is to take and move these around and make them into categories and label what the categories are. And I'm only going to give you about 5 minutes to do this with your group. I'd like to remind you and take your attention over here to the left. I'd like to remind you that you've got a pen and an eraser. You also have some sticky notes that you could use. And you also have text boxes. And each of these images you can drag around where you want to. Now here's the last thing before we leave, is I want you to pay attention to your breakout group. Because if you are in breakout group number 1, you're going to use slide number 1. And if you're in breakout group number 5, make sure that your group is working on only slide 5. And again, I'm going to give you only about 5 minutes. This is the Jamboard here. And I'll put you in breakout rooms right now. All right, so go for it. Again, 5 minutes. Let's see what you can do. Let's go, Ezra.
Sorry, someone just came into my room.
All right. Mia, Kira. What's up, guys?
Oh, where can we find the slides?
In the chat room, I put the link. No? Okay.
I don't see it.
Let me put it again.
Oh, got it.
Thank you.
You bet.
I don't know where to find the
Yeah, check the chat room. I just posted it again.
okay.
Cool. Okay, so got everybody back here. And for this practice one, I'm going to do the talking, but next time you guys will. So let's look at, first of all, let's look at page 1. This was breakout group 1. And remember sort of the basic rules, even though I gave them to you quickly. We're going to practice again, so don't worry, right? But we've got, what we want to have is, we want to make sure that everything that's available here, right, is going to fit everything above it. So for instance, Skittles, right, is going to be a hard candy, right? And it's also going to fit into candy. So that works, right? And notice that Skittles and Lifesavers, these are clearly different, even though they're both hard candies and they work their way up. So when you look at something for scientific classification, it should fit in all of the more general categories as we move up. So sour gummy worms, right, are going to be sour, and they're going to be gummies, and they're going to be candies, right? That will be the case. Now we're going to work on another Jamboard in a minute. I noticed that I've got 20 slides here, so you guys try not to make extra slides than what we have. Just go to the one that you're working on. So here's number 2. And, you know, again, I only gave you a certain amount of time. So notice that these are all kisses here, but they're not the same kisses. So they should eventually get into more specific categories down below, so that they're in. But notice that they're all part of chocolate, right? They're all part of candy. That really works very well. All of these are going to have to be separated in some way. So we decided that they were all fruity. We decided they were all candy. That's great, but they're clearly really different. For us, we'll be working on organisms instead of candy, right? So again, we've got some things going on here and some changes still being made. Great that we got to chocolates. We got a little funky here. I'm assuming that the sour came from the gummies. So we want to make sure that that's really clear as we put things together and make different categories. Let's look at number 4, right? Again, these are all 3 different chocolates, but should they all be on the same level? That's something that we're going to need to decide. So rather than just saying, because these are all chewy, but you really haven't labeled or defined how any of these are different. So think about that coming up in the next one. And then on the last category, great, looks like you guys are still working, and I understand, again, I cut you off in time, but we have the non-chocolate, the chocolate, and the gum. Those are kind of the big subcategories. I like that. And then we decided non-chocolate went from sour to sweet, right? And so we're gonna have to still make some more divisions here, but that's a good start. And that's what I want you to think about. All right, can I have everybody's cameras on? And please leave them on during class. All right, now, what I'm gonna have you do, and I will put it in the chat room now so that you guys can get a hold of it. This is gonna be the next segment of you guys doing classification. This one is going to be a lot bigger, and I'm going to give you more time. And so it's going to be your job. I'm going to give you about 15 minutes for this one, but it'll be your job to do the same sort of things, right? What is the biggest, broadest category? What are the next subcategories? And I also want you to know that even with scientists, right, more famous than us, that they're not going to get everything right. So we'll talk about that and see what you have when you're done. Now, when you are finished, I would like you to have the person in your group who has the very next birthday following August 31st. You are going to be the spokesman for your group. Okay. So I put up the link in the chat room, so make sure you get that. I'm gonna make your breakout rooms. They're gonna be the same as what you had before, and I'll open those rooms. Make sure you get the Jamboard board first. Mia, you doing okay? All right, guys. So hopefully you have your spokesperson for today. Let's start on slide number 5. Tell us what you got.
Okay, so we're not completely finished, but we did get farther than last time. So basically we have our plants and we grouped it between fungi and plants with leaves. And then animals, and we've kind of divided it into insects, birds, crustaceans, and mammals. And then from there, insects are arthropods, and then we were gonna work on the other one. And then, we have sea creatures, and then that's divided between crustaceans and clams. And then mammals, we have apes and monkeys, and then we have bacteria.
Okay.
Oh, and plants with leaves, we have annual, perennial, and trees.
Cool. So the part I really like is that you gave it a really great title for all of everything on here. That's a very general title, and that's perfect because that's what we want. Something really, really general. And then you subdivided that into plants and animals. So also very general, but not quite as general as organisms. So that's really good. And eventually, if we were working on this longer, and I don't expect you to know all these organisms really, really well, not yet, but we're working on that, is that we want to remember to make those subcategories. So like for instance, you say plants with leaves here, that's great because that's more specific than just plants. And then you divide it into trees and some other organisms. So that's really good. I know I didn't give you like a ton of time to do this, but I wanted you to at least start it. And we're going to see all of these organisms again, because we're going to work with them throughout the semester. So they will pop up again. How about group number 4? Tell us about your presentation here. Who's a spokesman for group number 4? Come on. All right, I'll come back to group number 4. Let's go to group number 3. Please be thinking if you're in group number 4, who is your person? Group number 3? Come on, guys.
Oh, we're group number 3. So basically, we started with organisms and then we put it into plants in nature and then insects and then flying animals. And then under organisms, there's also underwater animals and then monkeys. And then under plants and natures, we put like edible foods. And then under plants and natures, we also put bacteria.
Okay. So what I'd like to see is more organization as it goes down the page. But again, I was rushing you to work through this. I like that you have some subcategories and then some subcategories to the subcategories. So that's really good. And again, we're just starting this kind of thought wave. So good job. How about group number 2?
That's me. As you can see, everything on the slide is a living organism. And then under living organism, we separated it out into plants, bugs, and animals. So for plants, we put trees, food, and ferns. And then for the bugs, we put like butterflies, spiders, slugs, ticks. And for animals, we put we separated it out into airborne animals and primates. So primates would be like apes and monkeys, and airborne animals would be bats and birds and butterflies. And butterflies goes into bugs and animals.
Okay. So one really cool thing here is that you have a broad category of living organisms, right? So we could even make another category of stuff that's not here, of the extinct organisms. So I like that you did that. And I love your color coding because that makes it really easy to look for the subcategories. Really nice job. So I like the divisions here. And again, as scientists, we might argue them, but I like how you're thinking. It's good. How about group number 1?
That's me. Okay, so we divided it into plants, microorganisms, and animals. And under plants, we did fungi, bushes, and then we put spruce tree because, yeah. And then we put the 2 microorganisms under that category. And then for animals, we also did air, land, and water. And then land was divided into insects and mammals.
Okay. And again, like some of the other ones that we've looked at before, you'll notice like even down here on the bottom that we've got an insect category, and that each one of those 4 insects are divided into separate categories, whether we're looking at the tarantula or we're looking at a butterfly. Great. So how about group number 4? Can you guys fill me in now?
We actually forgot about the whole birthdays thing, but I'll volunteer to go as long as that's cool with everyone.
Thanks, Ezra.
So we have it separated into plants, microorganisms, and animals. One thing that I noticed a lot of other groups didn't realize is that fungi are not plants. So we had those like categories under microorganisms because they're like colonies of microorganisms, I believe, like mycelium. Not entirely sure how it works. For the plants, we separated all 3 of our plants into different categories. We have epiphyte. I'm not sure what that is. We have evergreens. So of course, we have the I think it's spruce or pine, and then for vegetables we have corn. So it's just like an edible plant category, I guess. And then for microorganisms, we have bacteria and fungi. I'm not sure if fungi count as bacteria. And then for animals, we first separated into invertebrates and vertebrates, since those are 2 very large categories that people fit organisms into. And then from there, insects and non-insects, since a great deal of invertebrates are insects. And for the vertebrates, flying and non-flying, just because that was a clear distinction the 2 had. And the 2 non-flying within our group also just happened to be primates. So we wrote that as like a subheader as well.
Great. So again, I didn't expect you to know the world about these organisms. So it's just fine if you have them in the wrong spot for right now, because we're going to learn more about them. But don't forget that you also need a most general category, right? Something that these are organisms and they should all fit there. And then to go off of what you're looking at in the picture, perfect. That's all we might have. And that might be even all that Aristotle had back in the day. Okay, so with that said, we're going to spend more time on this down the road, but not right this second. What I'd like to leave you with for today, which is kind of like what we're doing every time, is I want to make sure that we kind of round out some information. And I want to make sure I send you off with what you need to do next. So we are learning about classification. And in science, we have two names for that. We call it taxonomy, which is the study of classification, and systematics. So both of those, or all three of these terms, means that we're going to classify organisms. Even Aristotle, he only had 3 categories. They weren't great, but it was a good start. And we might have scientists, for instance, in group 1 versus 2 versus 3, 4, 5. You guys might disagree on some of those organisms. A lot of us weren't sure where that banana slug fit. So I'd like you to learn and get better at this as we go. But I also want you to know that now that we have DNA evidence, sometimes even recent classifications are changed. For instance, the mountain lion that lives in our area used to be called Felis concolor. That was its name. But now it's not. And because of DNA evidence, we know that it now has a different name. So where are we going next? What I would like you to do in your homework is to read chapter 18.1 in your book. And you need to take notes. But I really want to caution you, when you take notes, make sure you look in course information and you read about what I'm requiring for your notes to be like. Right? They need to be handwritten. They need to be in your notebook, right? You are going to submit your notes before 2 o'clock on Thursday as a photo. So you'll show me a photo of your notes. I'm going to expect that you do not just rewrite the book, that you are writing in your own words to get this done. And that you're going to complete a short quiz on Schoology based on those notes. Right, so that's what I'm leaving you with today. It's now about 3 o'clock, just after 3 o'clock. So you got 20 minutes to get that started. So reading notes for 18.1, you will submit those and also take a short quiz on Schoology. And you need to do that before 2 o'clock on Thursday. All right. Okay. If you have any questions, hang in there. And I'll get to you. And if not, I will see you guys on Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newman.